Afternoon. I'm Paul Colgan, Director of Government Affairs for the Home Builders Association of Greater Chicago. And today we have a Meet the Commissioner hour with our Building Commissioner, Matthew Baudet. And joining him is Grant Ulrich, who many of you know led the rewrite of the Chicago Building Code. And so Grant will be with us to help answer any questions you may have. But this hour with the Commissioner is one of what we hope to be occasional meetings that we have with key city leaders so that you guys have an opportunity to meet and interact and ask questions with the Commissioner. And at this point, I want to turn it over to Pat Cardoni, who is the Chicago chapter president of the Home Builders Association. Pat?
Thank you, Paul. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Pretty excited about this. We used to do these live in the last few years where we would always have the commissioner come join us, usually at Wells Fargo or one of the banks where we could get some people together so that we could understand what's happening and what's changing in our building community. Just a little background, Matt has been in the building side of things at the city for some time. 2011, he was a deputy commissioner that really brought in the review of all plans and stuff, which really modernized Chicago and really, really got this thing rolling. And it looks like since around that time, there has been nothing but, good changes in the city in terms of relationships with builders and in terms of, how we interact and how we get our inspections and how we actually have a way to communicate with people in the city. And the city commission. So to kick this off, we had a little chat last week, Paul and I did with Matt, and he's got some great ideas. It sounds like he's encouraging, all of us to try to help them by pitching in and giving them ideas on other ways they can help us through regulation or deregulation to help come up with ways to help us save money on projects. So I think we'd like to start off with saying welcome, Matt and Grant, and I'm assuming Mimi's here as well. Why don't you guys just say hi and we'll get started. Matt, maybe give us a little backdrop of how it's been just changing over from Judy to your leadership.
Sure. Well, thanks, Pat and Paul, for the Home Builders for having me here today. I'm still getting used to being the first virtual commissioner. So look back to the time when we could actually go out and meet in person instead of doing the Max Headroom thing. But as Pat said, I've been with the department for 9 years already as the first deputy. So, I was grateful to the Mayor Lightfoot for putting me in the commissioner spot, and really grateful to her for keeping the team together. As I've told Pat and Paul before, that was really the most important thing, I think, to everybody. We've enjoyed the stability of Judy Friedland for 5 years. She's an excellent commissioner and built great relationships. And the mayor realized that and knew that that was not something to tinker with. So, grateful to the mayor for the confidence, not only in myself, but in the team to continue moving forward with construction and economic development throughout the city.
That's fantastic. The thing is, I know in our conversation we had the other day, we were talking about, let's just go right to our PVC program that you guys have been so up on, and what type of savings has that program shown for builders in the last 2 to 3 years?
So that's been a very successful program. Again, implemented by Judy and continued by myself and our team. We've had about 2,000 projects that utilize that already for savings of over $32 million.
Wow.
And that's $32 million that can be reinvested into the city. It's $32 million that could make a project that maybe wouldn't have come here.
Right.
And also to help us with the maintaining and expanding affordable housing in the city. Just
how do you guys see this moving forward? Do you think there'll be more changes in plumbing that'll be the greater savings for builders, or where do you guys see this heading? Because I think that initiative is just so important to recognize that it is about profitability for builders and that, the city can help.
Yeah, I see it going on all areas. We've also, in the new code that, Grant was spearheaded, we used more use of wood and timber. So that's another area where we could safely
Right.
build in the city of Chicago, expand in the city of Chicago, and do it. I look at it more than, it's not an issue of profits. It's an issue of investment in the city.
Yeah.
So if we could have a code and a department that is a partner with folks in building
Right.
and investing in the city, that's a win for everybody.
Right. Can you give us a quick breakdown of any staff changes and how people have shuffled in seats? I mean, I'm sure with 5 years of Judy, we've kind of gotten used to some people in certain seats.
Yeah.
Can you give us the latest breakdown of what you got?
Well, the best is Marlene Hopkins, who has been here longer than I have and is really one of the gems of city government, is the first deputy now. So she
Right.
moved into the first deputy spot. We promoted Martha Reynoso, who is now a deputy, and she's going to be running our small permit process, which dovetails into the larger permits. So everything is interconnected here. So we
Right.
want to make sure we keep those smaller permits moving forward as well. And I'm sure there'll be other changes. We're still getting used to COVID right now. So
Yeah.
everyone's.
How is that overall affecting the department? I mean, I have seen no drop in services, to be honest, from my perspective, building safety.
No, it's a credit to our staff, really. And you mentioned earlier when we moved to electronic review, nobody thought 8 years ago when we did that we'd be where we are now.
Yeah.
So we were the first city to go 100% for electronic review. I know it was there were some bumps in the road initially. It was revolutionary for any city to go 100%, but now we're reaping the benefits of it. We didn't think we'd be in the COVID world 8 years later, but we're able to move forward while other cities that had 1 foot in the pool and 1 foot out of the pool are really struggling because, if they're still paper-based, they're in a world of hurt right now. It's just
Yeah.
getting the stuff to folks and people working from home. You can't drive these plans from the plumber's reviewer to the electrical reviewer's house.
Right.
We
Right.
can do that now. We're doing it since day one.
Yeah, no, that it is fantastic. Paul, you got some questions you want to come in with?
Well, yeah, some of our members have sent in some questions, and one of the questions when we were talking about using the affordable construction materials in small rehab and construction jobs in the neighborhoods, the question came through about allowing some use of these same materials in new and larger buildings. What is the status of that?
I don't think we're there yet for the larger buildings. So, this is a very good step to see how it works in the smaller buildings, to see what the success stories are, to see if it attracts more economic development throughout the city of Chicago. And, once we have a baseline of what we can judge on, we could, the nice thing about us is we're flexible. And this
Yeah.
new code is flexible. That's
Okay,
a key for us.
Another question that came from a member has to do with the 4/1 podium buildings that used to be a pretty common product in Chicago and then was taken out of the code. And so the question is, since that's allowed in the IBC and most municipalities, what's the department's concern about this building type? And will their consideration be given to allow it in future versions of the code to allow these 4/1s, 4 stories of combustible frame over a non-combustible podium?
Yeah, it's really the density of us right now. So, the model codes are great, but they are models, and each municipality is building it to their own unique needs. We've got the urban density here downtown and a lot of our surrounding neighborhoods, so we do need to adjust for that. And again, it's something that we're always willing to look at everything. That's the nice thing I think with this team is that they're. It's not a absolute no, but we'll see how it works out with the new code and where we can go from there.
Okay, well, one of the another concern raised is just there's a lot of new innovations coming into how we build our buildings, from prefab materials to modular buildings and other changes. How will these changes, these innovations be addressed by the code, and whether it's changes, or do you have other means to address innovative new ways of building?
That's a great question too. I think one of the nice things about the new code is that it's based on the model codes which evolve. So we want a code that's flexible. We also want one that evolves. So the way the codes are written now, every 3 years or so, they're looked at on a national level to see what new innovations came in, what's working better. And we can, since we're on that baseline already, we can quickly pivot and adapt for new technologies. We also
Okay.
have our alternative code review process where if something's not even in the model code yet, we're willing to take a look at it and see if it's something that could work here for the city.
Okay, so people can bring these new ideas to you, to your staff, and go through that review and possibly get some approvals if proven up in that process that it's as good, if not better, than what you have in the code. Is that correct?
Yeah, but we're always willing to take a look at everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
the code we wrote was 70 years old, and it predates the first Mayor Daley.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of things have changed since then, and our code hasn't. But now we're in a good place.
A couple of things have changed since then. You're right. All right. The last question that came from our members has to do with although the department has improved their submittal and review process in recent years, there's still a lot of back and forth that other municipalities don't have. And the fact that expediters are still making a living off this process demonstrates how complex this process can be. Is there a way to simplify the system, so especially on small projects in single family homes and remodels, so they don't need an expediter?
Yeah, we're always willing to look at everything here. The nice thing about, and I just checked right before I got on, we're at 67 days time to permit, which is, I think, great for any city. But I want to stress that the time with the city is 27 days. So on our time to permit is 67 days currently, 27 days with the city, 40 days with the design professional or expediter. And I always say I can't control what comes into us. And if you put a good product forward, it goes through quickly. If you put a product that has a lot of work or has a lot of gaps in it or doesn't meet the code, then that's when the ping pong match starts. That's when we have to send it back. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to send it back at all, but we do have to make sure that it's code compliant and overall make sure that it's safe. And if we see something in the drawings that isn't up to code or isn't safe, then we have to send that back.
Okay,
but we've got a very quick turnaround time here in the city.
Okay, good. Well, one of the questions that came in the chat function, if there's more questions out there, keep putting them in there, or the question was about the plumbing code. And it's been in the past, it's been mainly limited to variances, but I believe with the changes in the code, there's going to be some clear adoption or processes going forward, correct? On using some of this, like the PVC and other types of flexible connections in the code.
With all the codes, we're working with our stakeholders to make sure again that it's safe and flexible and affordable, and that is one of the codes that is coming up next. We're hoping to move forward with some of the more codes, but COVID, that's the one thing COVID did kind of knock us for a little bit of a delay, is that Grant wasn't able to convene the large groups that he did in the past to really break this down piece by piece, and that's why the code rewrite worked this time. It was broken down into several pieces. Started out with the electrical code, which went very well, and that brought us a lot of goodwill in the community that this is something that could be done. Then went to conveyance code, then the bigger chunk of the building code, and next is the mechanical codes, the gas codes, the plumbing code, fire code. So we're going piece by piece, and look forward to having all the stakeholders come together and work together and come up with a code that works for everybody.
I know that Grant had hoped to address that plumbing code issue this summer and fall, but as you say, COVID knocked that schedule out the window. It's too bad. Well, there's another question that came up here having to do with a one code for all communities. I know this has been talked about for a long time, that You know, Chicago has a code, Evanston has a code, and you start naming all the different municipalities. And although we may have a statewide plumbing code, everybody has exceptions to it. There's just so many different codes, 200 and some municipalities that we have to deal with in the Chicago regional area. The need for one code, at least from a builder standpoint, so he knows one standard product that he can build in the area, would be a huge benefit to us. But what's the likelihood of that do you see in the future? Is it still each community is really doing their own code, or do you see an opportunity for Chicago and other communities to come together?
I think each community will do its code. Our goal is to have the best code around. And when you have the best code around, then others are going to adopt it. But you know, I've worked in the states. I've traveled from the tip of the state to the top and side by side, and I know that you know, this is a very diverse state, and what works for Hardin, Illinois, isn't necessarily going to work up in Cook County, and vice versa. So you know, we've got the urban density issues that other villages and towns in the city, even in Cook County, don't have. So our code does need to be a little bit different. But I think moving towards the model codes, which I believe every community is based on the model codes, and they each kind of will tailor to their own needs. Just moving to the model code itself is a tremendous benefit for the design community and contractor community, because again, it's like, the closer we are to Niles or Skokie and the closer they are to us, the easier it is for folks. But you know, I do think we need to have our own unique provisions here, because you know, again, Chicago's not Rockford, and Rockford's not Chicago, so we each got our own little areas that we need to are unique to our particular geographic areas.
And if I could just jump in on that. So again, it's something that's been talked about. I think there's a report from 1915 about trying to have one Illinois code. And I would agree with the commissioner that I think having Chicago under a statewide code isn't workable. But you know, there's a couple of models out there. So in New York State, they have one code for all of the state outside New York City, and then New York City has its own code. And they try and keep them you know, coordinated, recognizing that people do work in the city and outside. But the state code for outside New York City is set by the state, and that might be one model here. Another model is what they do in southern Nevada around the Las Vegas area, where again, it is each municipality adopts their own code, but at least all of the major municipalities in that southern Nevada region come together, and I think they either do it every 3 years or 6 years, and they agree what their local amendments are going to be, and they adopt them together as a package. So it's still a local adoption, and some city in that consortium could opt out, but that might be a model that would work, at least to start building consensus for areas outside Chicago, you know, in Illinois. And I don't think the city fits into that. You know, we're bigger than 15 states in terms of population, and have a very different building stack, as the commissioner said. But you know, there are models out there for moving towards a uniform code in Illinois, and maybe we set a good example here in Chicago for what some other cities can do. I know after the electrical code, we've had a number of cities talk to us about either adopting our code or understanding our process for what we did with the electrical code in 2017.
Well, since we're talking about the adoption of these different codes, Grant, could you walk us through what the schedule is for the next code changes? I know that the schedule is moving or changing, but at least give us the progression of what steps you're going to go through, plumbing, et cetera, the fire and other codes.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, when we started this process, you know, electrical sort of was the first group to come in. So the electrical sector of the industry came in with some ideas. There were home builders and some affordable housing advocates that had some other ideas, historical preservation groups that thought there was some flexibility, especially for making it easier to do some rehabs with allowing flexible metallic conduit to be fished behind existing walls without ripping them open in existing buildings, and then some things around energy efficiency. So the electrical code, again, went first and set a really good example. And the implementation went smoothly, which again, as Commissioner said, bought us goodwill. And then similarly, we were able to work with the elevator industry around elevators and other conveyance devices, escalators, moving sidewalks, things like that. So we got 2 codes done. That set a good example. And then we had a very big chunk that we bid off, and somehow we got done and just implemented with COVID and everything. So again, really good partnerships, everyone working together. But the pieces that we left and we called phase 3 are the plumbing code, the mechanical code, the fuel gas code, and then some fire code regulations around hazardous occupancies, things like dry cleaners or industrial operations that are going to have larger quantities of hazardous chemicals. So the fire department has the fire code now, and they're looking and thinking about that. They're also getting used to this new code for the 95% of buildings that don't have to deal with specialized fire requirements. So the fire code is now sort of off on its own timetable with the fire department, and you can talk to them about that, but it probably doesn't affect home builders when you're building homes and residential buildings. But for the plumbing and mechanical codes, those are on track. The original timeline would have been to be a little further ahead with that conversation process this year, but we have continued to have conversations with those codes with stakeholders. So probably mechanical and fuel gas will have a stakeholder process looking at the 2021 international codes on those topics, probably starting in February or March. So we're working on our internal review of those. With plumbing, that's a sort of larger conversation. There's less agreement among the stakeholders there about what that code looks like. And again, we are committed to working towards a consensus process. So we're continuing to have those conversations. And I think we're very hopeful that we get to a point that we can work on that in 2021. But we're not going to force that if it's not ready.
Okay.
And Grant mentioned COVID too. I mean, I really do need to commend the mayor, Mayor Lightfoot, and the private sector for moving forward with the code. As you know, our code went into effect August 1st, 2020. So, I mean, who puts a new code in the middle of a pandemic? That takes courage, that takes strength. I'd like to thank the mayor for moving forward and not just saying, well, we're just going to stop everything until this COVID blows over. I know we've seen that in other cities where they've stopped construction, they stopped economic development, and now they're really hurting just to even get some of it back. So, I commend the governor and the mayor for keeping construction moving forward, and for us and the private sector too for moving forward with these code reforms.
Oh yeah, we appreciate the governor and the mayor keeping construction as an essential service so that we can keep working where we could. People did masking and other types of precautions for the workers, but we did appreciate a lot for what the administrations did, both in the city and the state, to allow us to keep it, stay at work. But that kind of brings me to another topic. Building permits are down, what I think I heard, 20% this year, and we're kind of anticipating the same level next year. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're down. Again, we're not as down as much as everybody else because we didn't stop. So we kept going. The economy as a whole has taken a hit, and that's reflected in a lot of areas, including construction and permitting. But we may be down a little bit, but New York got clobbered. They're down 45%. And I know when I'm reading there with a lot of the areas in New York is that it really did decimate the small contractor community. So small contractors were just completely knocked out of the box. In particular, women and minority businesses, contractors they don't know if they're even going to come back. They can't take the hit that they took in New York and rebound.
And that's sad to hear.
Yeah.
Well, trying to spur development is something that we as the Home Builders Association have been trying to do. I mean, we're trying to make sure that the city regulations, not just in the building department, but other departments as well, are more friendly, shall we say, to get development moving. So people can be at work, so we can get the investment, so we can improve the city, so we can get more property tax revenue from the growth. I mean, that's something that we favor very strongly. But it's been pointed out to me that if we had the type of cooperation, collaboration that we get from your department, Matt, and getting things done and getting things done quickly and basically as a partnership way, if other departments work the same way, we get more done in the city. So, we're just hoping that your ethos, if you will, of how you do work there can spread to a lot of other departments.
Yeah.
And
One
we
thing I've always
appreciate.
been,
Go ahead.
sorry. Yeah, the one thing I've always been proud of this department in particular is that we're boots on the ground, top to bottom. So, I got the suit on now, but you'll see Grant and I out putting up, doing inspections ourselves, checking stuff out on at night on weekends. Every member of this department works out in the field. It's something I've picked up along my career. When I was at the tollway, we all worked in the toll booth. Whether you were the boss or not, Jack Hartman, my old boss, put everybody out in the toll booth there.
You had to spend 1 8-hour shift down there
Yep.
taking nickels and dimes.
One thing I learned from folks like Jack, we're not a regulatory department. We're a customer service department. We don't regulate contractors. We don't regulate design professionals. They're our customers as well. So the general public and the private sector, they're our customers. That's how we approach it. So we want to be as customer friendly as we can while protecting the public safety. And we want to get economic development here in the city because it benefits everybody. I'm from a trade family. My dad was an electrician. My mom was a machinist. So, I value the work that you do. I wasn't skilled enough to do it myself, so I had to take other routes. But I really do appreciate the men and women that are out there every day, building our city, keeping our city safe, and making Chicago what it is.
Well, we appreciate all the work the department's done. We also appreciate the mayor for keeping the team intact, bringing you up into the commissioner's job and continuing that good work that we've had under Judy. When she first came in, that's, oh God, another lawyer, but she turned out to be such a great problem solver, and having her in the department just changed the attitude in the department just enough that it became we enjoyed working with the building department, and we're happy that you kind of continue that theme in the department. So we as the building community, I think, are going to benefit from that.
Matt, what do you see moving forward here that the building department and through regulation or deregulation can help with, spurring development in the south and the west side? I know where the mayor has her two areas where she wants development. I know that just from having experience doing homes at that type at different points in my career, that some of the costs, if we could get lower costs, I think you might be able to get minority better buy-in to, builders and stuff willing to get going on projects. Paul, I know we met last year and we were talking about water, which is always the big thing, is water and sewer hookups down in those areas. Do you have any ideas on what you guys can do to help kind of spur that?
Yeah, we work closely with the mayor's team on that, on the Invest Southwest, which is a fantastic program. We want to make sure that, like you said, if it costs too much to build it, they're not going to build it.
Right.
So you got to make it affordable. Affordable housing has to be affordable to build.
Correct.
Or else it's not affordable housing. So with the new code and with a lot of our procedures, we're working hard to make the code flexible and make it affordable while making it safe, because we do want to spur investment in all 77 communities of the city.
Right.
And to the point about water and sewer, the Department of Water Management is aware of that. And they also have the issue about lead service lines that we have here. So one of the initiatives in Mayor Lightfoot's proposed 2021 budget is for homeowners who voluntarily want to replace a existing lead service line at their cost. The city will waive up to $3,100 in permit fees, whether those are the water connection fees or the CDOT street opening fees. So the proposal right now is limited to owner occupied homes or small residential buildings. I think it allows 2 and 3 flats. But I think that's something to build on. And if that's successful, go in and look at and have a conversation with the mayor's team about whether expanding that fee waiver could help with development in certain communities and reinvesting in buildings that might be vacant or need that reinvestment.
Yeah,
on
it
the
seems
whole
like
issue of
there's-
fee waivers, if I may, if you're looking at trying to build affordable owner occupied homes in the south side and west side at a price point where working families can afford it, every little bit makes a huge difference. And so if the opportunity to waive those fees or any fees in the building department or other departments usually goes to benefit the buyer of the home, not necessarily the builder of the home. Because if the builder spends less money to build the house, then obviously they can sell it for a price that people can afford. And we've looked at different plans where in some cases, the cost of the home has to be subsidized in order to sell it at a price that people can afford. So every one of those fee waivers, whether it's in building, water, or any other department, can make a huge difference for affordability in some neighborhoods of Chicago. Pat, you wanted to ask a question.
No, you kind of went the same direction I was going to go. I mean, my whole thing is, I know that some of our members are looking, all the time at trying to, figure out how do we crack that nut, right? I mean, it's like when you go down to those areas, it is making the house affordable enough that you can actually sell it at a decent price, and I think everybody's struggling with that.
Another question has come across about how has COVID impacted your building inspections? Are your inspectors still getting out there? Are we still getting the work done that needs to get done in a timely way?
Yeah, I mean, we're still getting out there, and again, thanks to the construction industry for keeping the sites clean and keep the sites healthy, so we can get out there. And we're also looking at other options. We're looking at some virtual inspections. So that's something we looked at when COVID first hit, and we knew that some rural areas have been doing this for a while just because of the territory they have to cover. So I've always said I need to be where we're needed. So for good contractors that we know we're going to go out there and the work's going to be up to code, it's going to be perfect. If we can do some of that virtually, then that's fantastic. That's going to increase our ability to do more inspections. For the bad ones that we still have to go and keep an eye on, we're going to keep an eye on them, but we're going to be able to get to them. But for the good contractors, if we could do some of that stuff virtually, I know there's some you have to do hands-on, but if we can do some of that through virtual inspections, that's going to speed up the time to inspection. And it's also going to increase the number of inspections we can do.
Yeah, another question that came across is, due to the drop in the number of permits and with the city's budget issues, are we anticipating any changes in permit fees or other fees in your department in the next fiscal year?
Not at the time. That hasn't come up. Again, to Pat's point, if you make it too expensive to build, they're not going to build.
Right.
So if the permit fees start going up, that's going to be less. That's going to be less permits that are coming out there. And we want to make sure that we keep our permit fees reasonable. The one thing we don't want to do is to spur the growth of unlicensed contractors out there. So when people think permits are too expensive or too much of a hassle to get, that's when you get this underground unlicensed contractors out there who not only are licensed, sometimes they don't know what they're doing. And you don't want unlicensed plumbers out there. You don't want unlicensed electricians out there, because that's when they're gone in 6 months and someone's left with their life investment down the drain, because, no pun intended, because their plumbing doesn't work or their electrical's faulty, and then you got a fire.
Yeah, I think you get a lot of support from our members on that, because we sometimes feel the industry gets a black eye, shall we say, from the people who flaunt the rules or ignore the rules or just do the wrong thing. And so it impacts us as the industry, and the good operators sit back and say, what are these people doing? Why are they doing this? Because, they don't understand why people would cut the corners so much that they would, again, leave the homeowner vulnerable. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about how do you make sure everybody's on the same sort of level platform, so that we're all doing safe work, but we're doing it affordably, doing it efficiently, it's a hard balance. I know it's tough for you guys because you got to keep that regulatory, tight fist going. At the same time, you're trying to encourage people to give them a pat in the back, keep going. And it's a delicate balance for you. But I think you're doing it well.
Yeah, thanks. And we appreciate, the contractor community. Always feel free to reach out to any of us if you see unlicensed folks out there. We can't be everywhere, so we rely on the industry to also help us track some of these folks down and basically get them out of our city.
Okay, I just kind of saying to our audience that the chat line has dried up. We need a few more questions from you. I need to go. Oh, here, just a minute. Any thought to increasing the fines and penalties for unlicensed contractors? And is charging for work such as plumbing without a license or contractor registration, is that a felony?
It's not a felony. The unlicensed ones are always hard because, these are folks that don't get permits and they don't pay fines either. So we do work with the Cook County State's Attorney and also the Attorney General at times, because there's also an element of consumer fraud in these. So they're not just doing the work without permits or license. They're charging 5 times what it should be, and they're not, they're taking the money up front and then skipping out on folks. And a lot of this is cash, is a cash business. So it's hard to nail them down, but we do work with the prosecutors, both the law department in the city and our partners in the county and the state, to really try to clamp down on these folks.
Let's see, I'll go back to my list of questions.
I remember last year, Paul, or 2 years ago, we were talking to Judy about trying to come up with a program where people from our association could help possibly with the repeat offenders and stuff like that through education, or, I don't know. We never did get further than discussions. What about education, Paul and Matt and Grant? What can we do to help educate? What can we as an association help do to help educate builders?
I think any public service we could work on, any programs, everything's on the internet now. So we list all of our licensed contractors. So you can go on our webpage or on the internet, and you can find out who's a licensed general contractor.
So you
find out
like
who's a licensed electrical contractor. And we keep pounding away with folks every opportunity we can, large groups, small groups, to really check your contractors.
Could we co-market something together about, hey, use these people off these lists, not necessarily our members? We're all for that.
Yeah, that'd be
if it was a
fantastic.
Facebook campaign or a LinkedIn campaign to where it's just constantly going out.
Yeah, no, that'd be fantastic.
Any volunteers? Just kidding.
We'll get a few volunteers from the audience here.
I see some names on here I know who could do it.
Okay. Well, I've kind of run through my list of questions. We've got a few more minutes left here. If there's anybody in the audience would like to ask a question, please put it on the chat, and we'll ask it before we go here. But at this point,
coming in here, Paul, if you want to take a look.
All right. Okay. Let's see. The Plumbing Contractors Association encourages contractors, members of Local 130, and the public to notify us of posers and report them to Illinois Department of Public Health. Just a suggestion for the city. That's an interesting point to make.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the fill the cavity approach for insulation applicable to a 3/4 inch cavity created by removing plaster on an exterior solid masonry wall in a typical 2-flat rehab, as opposed to furring with 2x6s and insulating to R20? That was a mouthful, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that one's probably for me. So,
Yeah, I think so.
I
think so.
I think one thing that was put into the energy code is, so that would be the typical approach, is that there is an expectation if you are opening up walls and exposing cavities, that you do fill the cavity. But recognizing that with some of these traditional buildings with load-bearing masonry walls and then a sort of small air gap and an interior layer of plaster, the way those buildings work is that airspace helps them to breathe. So there is a provision added to our energy code in Chicago that says that if you have a licensed design professional, engineer or an architect, analyze that and say that it's not appropriate to fill that with insulation, you can leave that uninsulated. So again, recognizing that sometimes stuffing insulation in there and not allowing that to breathe, New York City has a similar provision because they found and in New York City, it happened with a few high rises. They sort of got insulation shoved up against the masonry walls, and it caused moisture to build up in the walls and chunks to fall off those buildings. And we do want to avoid that here.
Yeah, another one of our members says, be cautious about vapor control. So they're anticipating that answer right there. They're getting a vapor analysis done on needing that cavity between the two, between the wall and the brick.
Yeah, and that was exactly the insight that was brought to us when we were doing the code rewrite, and we got it incorporated in the code. We looked for best practices. You know, that idea was out there. So thanks, Tim, for adding that to comments.
Mhm.
All right. Well, we've got
What
about
else we got?
a few minutes left here, Commissioner. I'd like to turn it over to you or Grant to, if you've got any closing remarks or comments you'd like to make. Here's your opportunity.
Sure. Again, I would just like to thank you for this opportunity and look forward to working with you. I'm always proud of Chicago because, Grant mentioned New York. New York, you read about an accident once every other day. You read about cranes falling down in Texas. You hear about building collapses around the country, and you don't hear that as much here. Yeah, we do have small, minor accidents here every now and then, but credit to our contractors, our tradespeople, our design professionals. We take great pride in our work here, and that's reflected in the fact that we've got a very safe city for construction here in Chicago. We're not dealing with I'm not running around every day dealing with accidents that my counterparts in New York or San Francisco or other cities are dealing with. And that's really a credit to the private sector. You take great pride in your work, and it shows. And we appreciate that.
Okay, Commissioner, thank you very much. I know, Grant, if you had anything else you wanted to add.
In our conversation, Paul, we had the other day, Matt had mentioned, if we have ideas about how we could have and help them find, some areas where we could be cost saving for not only owners and stuff. How can we set up a pipeline for that sort of thing?
You can always email me directly or Grant directly.
Okay.
Yeah, so Pat, let me restate that. What the commissioner asked, he wanted to know where are you saving money because of the new code, and how much money are you saving because of the new code? He'd like to have examples. The department would like to know that they've adopted these changes at the urging of the industry. From us, the construction, the design people, these changes have been made to help us. But they would like to have concrete examples, some real examples of how that has saved money. So we know you mentioned some of the savings from your plumbing program for affordable housing. I think you're looking for more from a broader general audience. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly on point, Paul. I mean, what we see, the permit will say that this is a $5 million project. Now, we don't know if that was a $7 million project prior to the code rewrite or not. So we do rely on you guys to tell us, hey, we really are saving a lot of money here, and this is exactly how much. Because that helps us build a
statement
case
of your leadership too.
Yeah, but it's a statement that we could take to city council and say that this really is saving money. And if you want to save money, you want to expand affordable housing in the city, you want to expand economic development. Here's concrete things of the code that you passed is working, and we need to continue that work.
Okay, Commissioner. Well, we all know where to reach you. Matthew O'Day at thecityofchicago.org, correct?
A dot in between the first and last name.
Okay.
So Matthew.Bodie.
Matthew.Bodie. Okay.
Or if you don't want to figure out how to spell that,
Yeah.
you can do DOB Commissioner, just like
Yeah.
Commissioner Friedland used.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
DOB Commissioner at cityofchicago.org is probably easier to
Yeah, it's probably
figure out
better
how to
too.
spell.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if you have your ideas, you have your suggestions, you've got your examples, please submit them to the department. They're looking to hear from you.
Yep.
And for those of you who joined us today, thank you very much. The Home Builders Association takes pride in its relationship with people in the city of Chicago. And so we want to thank the commissioner and his deputy Grant for being with us today. If you want to join the Home Builders Association, join us at go to hbagc.com, and we'd love to have you as a member. And thank you everyone for joining us. And it's a great program, and stay healthy out there.